So as I told you, divs and spans are general purpose containers. But HTML5 introduced a few more container elements that are more descriptive or meaningful. We refer to these as semantic elements. So wherever possible, we should use these new elements instead of the generic containers like div and span, because this helps search engines better understand our pages and what they contain. In this lesson, we're going to go through some of these semantic elements, and we'll cover the rest in the next lesson. So let's say we want to represent a blog post. We can define a div, give it a class, like article or post, doesn't matter. Inside this div, we can have an h1 followed by some text, right? Now, there's nothing particularly wrong with this structure, but we can improve it and make it more meaningful by using semantic elements. So in HTML5, we have an element for representing articles. That is the article element. So if we replace this div with the article element, we're making our markup more meaningful to search engines. Now, this article doesn't have to be a blog post or a newspaper article. It can be any independent, self-contained piece of content. For example, it could be a forum post, user-submitted comments, reviews, product cards, and so on. For example, here on adobe.com, here we can see the showcase of 3 different products. Each product card can be represented using an article element. So an article can be any independent, self-contained piece of content. Now, an article can contain one or more figures like images, tables, lists, and so on. So here we can have an image element, and this is perfectly fine, but we can improve this structure and make it more meaningful by wrapping this image element inside a figure element to tell search engines that this is a figure and not just a regular image. So let's bring up the command palette and use the wrap command to wrap this element inside a figure element. Here's what we get. So the figure element is just a container for figures. It doesn't have any visual characteristics, okay? Now, a figure can optionally have a caption. This caption can be above or below the figure. So here we can add a caption using the fig caption element. But unfortunately, at the time of recording this video, VS Code doesn't recognize this element. So if I press tab, it doesn't generate the tags. So here we have to use a left angle bracket, then close it here to generate these tags. So here we can say my coffee this morning. Now let's save the changes and take a look. So we don't have an image here because I didn't set the source, but you can see an example of a caption. And again, this caption can be above or below the image. So this is an application of the figure element. Now, sometimes we want to highlight our text. In the last lesson, I told you how to do this using the span element. So let's say we want to highlight this lorem. We wrap it inside a span, and then give that span a class like highlight. That's one way to do this. But in HTML5, we have a semantic element for this very reason. That is the mark element. So if you wrap this inside a mark element, we get the same result as before. Our highlighted text has a yellow background color, and we didn't have to explicitly set this color. This is the default style of marked elements. So whenever we want to highlight or mark content, we can use the mark element. Now, one last element we're going to cover in this lesson. Quite often, articles have a published date and time. So below this heading, we can have a paragraph and say published January 1st, 2021 at 5 p.m. This is perfectly fine, but we can wrap this part inside a time component to make it more semantic. So once again, VS Code doesn't recognize the time element. So here we have to manually type a left angle bracket and then close it like this. Now let's move the date and time over here. Good. So if we save the changes, look, our date time doesn't have any visual characteristic. It's displayed like normal text. But our HTML markup better represent the structure of this page. Now here we can optionally set the datetime attribute to a machine-readable datetime. Once again, this can help search engines better extract the necessary information from this page. So here's the format that we have to follow. 2 digits for the year, a hyphen, 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day. Now if you have a time, we add a space and type the time on 24-hour time clock, so 1700. Now imagine if instead of these semantic elements like article, time, mark, and figure, all we had was divs and spans. our HTML markup wouldn't be very descriptive, right? So even though the majority of web pages on our internet are built with divs and spans, going forward, it's highly recommended to use semantic elements. We're going to cover more semantic elements in the next lesson.